handle those times. It's what you allow those things to produce in you. Suffering will produce endurance, and then endurance produces character. And if we ever needed character in our nation, it's now, especially among our politicians, let's just be honest. But it just filters down to us. We need to be people of character. That's why I said, I see this stuff on Facebook, and I'm like, why do you air all this stuff out? So I'm just, unfollow. Don't want to unfriend because, I'm a people pleaser, and don't want to go all the way there. But, I don't want to see the drama, and where's your faith? Where's your faith? Where's your faith? There have been times as a pastor in the last 24 years that, my name was being trashed, and I would so want to do something about it. And I would, Shannon, I'd go to my wife, and I don't like this. It's not right. It's not fair. It's not true. I want to tell my side of the story, all this stuff. And yet, really, it would always come back to this. You know what? I'm going to let God fight my battle. I don't need to say anything. Because over time, my character will be proven. My character will be proven over time. It will come out. And it won't always be righted. But I have to leave some things with God. Suffering, it produces endurance. Endurance, just enduring those times, it produces character. And character, look at this, character produces hope. Anybody need some hope in your life? Anybody? Well, it starts with suffering. I know you didn't want to hear that, but that's kind of where it starts. We go through difficult times, and those difficult times, they put us in a time of endurance. It's like, and I don't know anything about weightlifting, except that I can't do it. But I do know this, the few times I've tried, your muscles don't feel good. You're sore the next day. I remember one of our youth pastors talked about going to the gym. He hadn't worked out in years, and I know this is true. The first time you go, you're like, man, I'm doing a lot better than I thought I would. And you usually overdo it. And so the next day, he had really worked his legs out. And the next day, because we laughed about this, because his wife would tell this and how funny it was. He got up, got out of bed, and fell flat on his face. His legs couldn't work. And then he had to stay in bed for like 2 days. Because suffering produced, he had to endure all that. And then, the character, I'm not working out like that again. You learn through this. It's this thing. You want hope in your life? Well, it starts in how you handle difficult times and how you endure those times and allow those times to produce a character in you that character then produces hope so that the next time those things happen, you're not shaken. Abraham, his very imperfect faith in the beginning. But then we see his faith that has grown to the place that he's not naming and claiming and all this. His faith is in, but God, you promised. I'm just going to rest on your promise. You want me to sacrifice Isaac? I'll sacrifice Isaac. But I'm not going to waver in your promise to me. Man, if we could just get to that place as followers of Christ, that we don't waver in his promises. He didn't say everything would be wonderful. He didn't say that we'd always be healed of everything that happens. Some people are, some aren't. I'll never be able to explain that to you. And those who think they can't explain it, they really can't. I don't know. I can't explain why some are healed and some are not. We've made up things, even though about faith, there again. You just didn't have enough faith. If you just had enough faith, God would heal you. Well, that makes people feel good, doesn't it? Now they think there's something wrong with them. Wow, isn't that wonderful? There's something wrong with you. There's some, remember that back in the day too? That went around, I think, in the 80s, maybe the 70s and 80s, about, there just must be sin in your life, Remember, and I told you my wife's response to that, Shannon. I love her response to that. And, well, of course, there is sin in my life. There's sin in everybody's life. I mean, based on that, we're all doomed. Well, if you Isn't it interesting? Rather than just, you know what, God, I'm just going to trust your promise. And the promise of God for you and for me is this. It's not long life. It's not a wonderful, perfect life. It's a blessed life, but then it really comes down to how do you define blessed? Really, I'm serious. Because when I see that Escalade going down the turnpike with the tag that says blessed, I just shake my head. I just want to run into him. Say, yeah, well, claim that one. No. Because what you're saying is if you were as good as me, you could be like me. If you had my kind of faith, you'd live this kind of life too. No. No. No, we live a blessed life, but the promise I have of God is this. Here's the promise. The day will come when there will be no more breath left in me. And on that day I shall see Christ. That's my promise. That's my promise. And on that day, he's faithful and just. And that's the promise. There will come this day. I don't know even how all that's going to look or work. And I just know that on the day that I no longer have a breath, I will hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the kingdom that's been prepared for you. That's the promise. I don't have a promise of a great life. I don't have a promise of never having a sickness or ever breaking a bone or falling out of a ladder with a chainsaw. I don't have those promises. You know, I have that, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. You are saved by grace through faith. And I will be with you no matter what is going on. I will be with you through it. It's one reason, I'll just be honest, I struggle with the whole tribulation thing because, we rejoice that everybody else is going to go through hell while God takes us away. And for me, I always see the Old Testament as a picture of the New Testament, and God never just rescued people out of situations, but he always faithfully took people through situations. They endured. He said, you'll go through the fire, but you'll not be, say it, burned. You'll go through the deep water, but you will not. You'll endure. Why? Because suffering produces what? Endurance. And endurance produces what? Character. That you'll get more to where, character is, bring it on. I'm going to be faithful. God will get me through. I just think that that's more of the Christian faith than what we've turned it into. I think that's what Paul is saying here. Quit bickering about and pointing the finger. And we got to get together on this. We've got to show we should be the display. What Paul, I think, was the one, too, who said we are, is it in Ephesians where he says that we are to be a letter. Like, when they look at us, they're reading a letter of Christ. Our lives are like written letters of the faithfulness of God, of his faithfulness. And so because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Verse 6, for while we were still weak, and I love this, for while we were still weak at just the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. Just the right time, I think, and I don't know, you feel free to correct me. It's kind of like a moed, it's that Greek word. It's just God had it already set in time when this was going to happen. And at just the right time, at just the exact time, Jesus came and he died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare to die. But God shows his love for you and I, that while we were still sinners, he died for us. And I know it's just because it's a big hot topic right now, and you got to, I'm not going to dig into the weeds with this, but you think about other things. I've already brought out the LGBTQ plus community and the things that are going on and the laws and all this and my son Grady, he just wrote this whole paper, 48 pages on gender identity, and he asked me to read it yesterday and just tell him if it's making sense, and I'm like, no, it does, but when you're old like me, no. I don't understand all these terms. I don't understand this terminology, but he's explaining why they think things have happened and how they've happened and what's happened. And a lot of it is the technology and all of this stuff. And and I was just amazed at reading this paper. But, so sometimes we can look at those things and forget that while I was a sinner, he died for me. I forget. And it's easy to forget. While I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. Since, therefore, I have now been justified by his blood, much more shall I be saved by him from God's wrath. For if while I were enemies, I was reconciled to God by the death of his son, much more now that, I'm just saying it says we, that I was reconciled, that I'll be saved by his life. And more than that, also, I'll rejoice in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation. See, that's the biggest thing here, is salvation is, I've been reconciled to God. That barrier was torn down. When Jesus died, the curtain was ripped from the top to the bottom, heaven coming to earth, top to the bottom. No more, can't get to God because it's the holy place, and only the high priest one time a year. And you guys do know that, at least from what I have read and understand, that even then when the high priest went in, they got tied a rope around his ankle. And he wore bells. And if the bell stopped ringing, you better tug on that rope and get him out. He died. Something wasn't right. So the curtain was tore. You know what that represents is that anybody can go into the holy place. Jesus kind of gave them a picture of that. You remember during Passover week when he ran everybody out, which we like to focus on the table flipping, don't we? I don't focus on the table flipping. I focus on why he did that. See, he was pushing all these chairs out of the way right here so he could invite in all the sick and the lame who were never allowed to come because they weren't good enough. And he healed them all. And then he turned. Went home, basically to say, this is what this place was always supposed to be about. You've turned it into a den of thieves. This was supposed to be a place of healing where people are made whole. We got a glimpse of it right there, before he died on the cross. And I just think we've got to get back to this church. We've got to get back to this faith that it grows in times of suffering, and those times will come. Doesn't mean I've done anything wrong. It's just the fact that there is a spiritual enemy that has nothing to do with the light, and it will be continually pushing against anything that is light. And I will run into those things, but the thing is I have been called to be one who endures. I don't give up. It doesn't shake my faith. It doesn't shatter my faith. It doesn't diminish my faith. But actually my faith grows through those times because it keeps producing character, and character produces hope. And when I'm full of hope, that's the thing. And I've learned that even with people in the last few years, is if you get someone and you can get all of the hope out of their life to where they have no hope whatsoever, well, you've killed them. Because we cannot live without hope. We have to have hope in something. I watched this thing. It had nothing to do with Christianity today. It's because my dogs continue to wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so some clip 30 minutes long, and it was this lady testifying about how she was raised and how abuse and ended up trying to take her life. And that was the thing. She goes, I got the I had no hope. I just wanted out. I was done. My family came. I just said, I don't want to talk to them. It's not because I was mad at them. It was just because I had landed in a place I had no hope. I was done. That's a scary place to be. We're to be hope dealers, hope givers, hope expressors. Those people, when the world sees us, we should always be full of hope. And it shouldn't matter what our circumstances are. And I don't mean, just that, blessed and highly favored, I'm just, no, I mean, it's just that it doesn't matter. We can even weep in the brokenness of our life, but we can still have hope. We can be going through the worst thing in our life and still we're hanging on to God's promise. But God is faithful. He'll never leave me. He'll never forsake me. And I think it's those times when we feel his presence the most. I really do. I think it's in those times that you'll be shocked. You call on the name of the Lord, and he is right there. Daniel in the lion's den, he's right there. He'll shut the lion's mouth. And there will be that peace in the midst of the storm. It's Jesus on the boat. It's Jesus walking on the water. It's him calming the storm. I mean, why do you think all that stuff happened? We think it happens so that, we're actually going to go to the lake and we're going to pray, and by faith, I'm going to walk on this water. I mean, I've seen those people. That's not what that's about. It's not so you and I can walk on water. What's that going to prove? Yeah, you'll be TikTok famous for a week. I mean, no, it's that there's this calm in the midst of the storm. It's that he'll come to you in the storm, that he's faithful to be with you in the storm, that he can rest in the storm, and so can you. You can find your peace and your hope in this. This is that. Quit pointing the finger. Quit bickering. Quit fighting amongst yourselves, what Paul's saying. Look at Abraham. Abraham wasn't circumcised when this happened, and then he was circumcised as a sign. But, he's the father of many nations. He's the father of the Gentiles as much as he's the father of the Jews. He's the father of the people of God. He's, Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Yeah, there's your jazzercise song. Why don't you stand with me? Let's get our communion and do communion. I'll let you go. I did have a prayer request. Hey, Olivia, go ahead and shut the live stream off.